She was supposed to be safe. That was the last thought her mother had, as the crowd pushed forward, and the loudspeakers kept repeating orders no one fully understood. People were running, shouting, crying, holding children close to their chests. Smoke filled the air, not thick enough to blind, but heavy enough to make every breath feel urgent. The mother kept one hand on her daughter's wrist, afraid that if she let go for even a second, she would lose her. The girl was young still, small enough to be pulled along, but old enough to understand fear. She did not cry at first. She just looked around with wide eyes, trying to stay strong the way her mother had taught her. Then everything happened too fast. A sudden push from behind. Someone tripped. Another person fell. The grip broke. The mother turned back instantly, calling out, but the noise swallowed her voice. People moved like a wave, unstoppable. Armed guards shouted directions. Someone grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a transport vehicle, telling her the children were already on board, that she had to move now. She kept looking back, searching for that familiar face, those small hands. She never saw them dot by the time the doors closed. The vehicle was already moving. She pressed her face to the window, tears streaming, repeating her daughter's name again and again like a prayer. She told herself the girl must be safe, must have been taken another way. She had to believe that. If she didn't, she would break Dot far behind, hidden between damaged buildings and scattered debris. The girl sat alone. Her knees were scraped, her palms shaking as she hugged herself. She had run the wrong way. When the crowd split, she followed the wrong backs, the wrong voices. By the time she realized her mother was gone, it was too late. She tried to follow the transport, but her legs were weak and the path was blocked. Eventually, she hid where she was told never to go alone. Not because she wanted to, but because fear pushed her there. She waited. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound made her flinch. She whispered to herself that her mother would come back, that she just needed to stay quiet and brave. That was when the footsteps came. Slow, careful, not rushing like the others had been. The girl pressed herself closer to the wall, holding her breath. She remembered all the warnings she had been given. But when the figure appeared, it was not what she expected. It was a human soldier. His uniform was dusty, his face tired. He looked no older than someone who had seen too much too soon. He stopped the moment he saw her, hands slowly lifting, weapon lowered, eyes softening with surprise. "It's okay," he said gently, like one would speak to a frightened animal. "I'm not here to hurt you." She did not answer. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. He crouched down, keeping distance, making himself smaller. He noticed the way she held herself, the marks on her knees, the way her eyes searched his face for lies. "You're alone," he said quietly, not as a question. She nodded. He exhaled slowly, looking around, checking the area. Protocol said he should report immediately. Protocol said many things, but none of them explained what to do when a child looked at you like you were the last person left in the world. "Do you know where your mother is?" he asked. Her eyes filled instantly. She shook her head. That was all it took. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small water bottle, placing it on the ground between them. He stepped back again, letting her decide. After a moment, she crawled forward and took it with both hands, drinking carefully. "I'll stay with you," he said. "I promise." Promises were dangerous things in places like this. He knew that, but he said it anyway. Time passed differently after that. He guided her through quieter paths, away from the noise. When she was tired, he let her rest. When she was scared, he spoke softly, telling her stories about normal things, about quiet mornings, warm food, places without sirens. She asked him once if he was scared. He smiled a little and said, "All the time." That answer made her trust him more. As the sky began to change color, he wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. It was too big, heavy with the smell of dust and metal, but it was warm. She held it tightly. He kept watch all night, barely sleeping, sitting with his back to a wall and his eyes scanning the darkness. Every sound made his muscles tense, but he did not move away from her. Somewhere far away, her mother sat on the floor of a crowded shelter, staring at nothing. Everyone around her talked about survival, about next steps, about hope. She heard none of it. All she could see was her daughter's face the last moment they were together. All she could hear was the echo of her own voice, calling out too late. She whispered into the empty air, "Please be safe, please." And in a broken city, a soldier and a lost child waited for morning, connected by nothing but chance, courage, and a promise that had not yet been tested. That was only the beginning. She woke up to the first light of dawn breaking through the broken walls. The soldier was already awake, sitting nearby, his eyes scanning the horizon. He looked tired, his uniform dusty, his face lined from days that felt much longer. But when he saw her stir, he smiled gently, as if to remind her that she was still safe. They had spent the night in a small, abandoned building, far from the main roads and the chaos that had swallowed the city. It was quiet, almost peaceful, and for the first time since the separation, the girl felt a small spark of hope. She stretched her arms, wincing as her scraped knees protested, and he handed her a clean cloth to wipe the dust from her face. "Feeling better?" he asked softly. She nodded, her lips pressed together. Words were still hard to find in a world that had suddenly turned frightening. She had learned to keep quiet, to observe, to wait. But he didn't rush her. He waited patiently for every word she finally spoke. "Will we find my mother?" she asked, her voice trembling. He paused. The question was heavy, more than it seemed. He didn't lie, but he didn't promise. "I'll do everything I can," he said finally. "We'll find her together." And so they began to move. Slowly, carefully, stepping through streets that were once familiar, but now unrecognizable. Rubble blocked roads, and broken signs swung in the wind like lost memories. Sometimes the girl wanted to run, to hide, to go back to the last moment she remembered with her mother. But the soldier held her hand firmly, guiding her forward. They avoided the main routes, the checkpoints crowded with armed guards, and the groups of frightened people moving aimlessly. He knew some places were too dangerous to cross, and he taught her to notice them too, the quiet streets, the shadows, the sound of running water that could hide footsteps. He never forced her to keep up, but he encouraged her to be brave. During the journey, they shared small moments that felt normal, even in a world gone mad. He showed her how to find clean water in puddles that others had overlooked. He taught her how to use broken walls as shields. And sometimes, when the sun was high and the danger momentarily low, he told her stories not of war, but of simple things like a quiet morning in a field or a hot meal shared with friends. She started to smile again. Small smiles at first, but smiles nonetheless. She learned that even in fear, there could be moments of safety, even if only for a little while. And every time she smiled, the soldier's eyes softened, a reminder that his purpose had become hers too. One evening, they came to a place where the air smelled of smoke, but not the same smoke from the day she was separated. It was from small fires. People had started to cook meals, or to stay warm. She crouched down behind a broken wall, watching silently as he signaled her to stay quiet. The soldier peeked around the corner and then returned, shaking his head. "They're moving through the area," he whispered. "We'll wait for them to pass." She nodded, understanding that the world outside was still dangerous. Its safety was never permanent. But the presence of the soldier made it bearable. She was no longer alone. Days turned into nights, and nights into more days. They traveled mostly at dawn and dusk, when the light was softer, when fewer eyes watched. The soldier found small places for them to rest, sometimes a quiet garden overgrown with weeds, sometimes the back of an empty store. Each night he checked her wounds, cleaned the scrapes on her hands and knees, and reassured her that she was growing stronger, braver. The girl began to ask more questions. "Do you have a family?" she asked one evening. He hesitated, then shook his head. "I have people I care about," he said. "But right now, this is my family." She didn't fully understand, but she nodded. And she realized slowly that he wasn't just a protector. He was someone she could trust, someone who would not abandon her, someone who had chosen her life over his own comfort and safety. One night, they found themselves near a river. The water ran fast, and the reflection of the moon danced on its surface. The girl dipped her hand in, letting the cool water soothe her. He watched her silently, understanding that she needed these little moments to remember what it meant to feel alive. "We should rest here for a while," he said. "It's quiet, and it's safe for tonight." They made a small camp behind some bushes. He taught her how to keep a small fire without drawing attention. They ate the last of the rations they had, sharing them evenly. She felt full for the first time in days, and more importantly, she felt safe. But even in safety, fear lingered. She thought constantly of her mother, of the long hours spent apart, of the unknown that awaited them. She would wake up in the middle of the night, trembling, thinking of her mother's worried eyes and the last words they had spoken. He would always be there, silently, when she needed reassurance. "We're getting closer," he said one night. "I promise we won't give up." Her heart wanted to believe him, and slowly it began to. They continued their journey, moving through villages and abandoned homes, always careful, always watching. The bond between them grew stronger with each step, built not just on survival, but on quiet acts of kindness, trust, and the simple understanding that they needed each other to keep going. One afternoon, they stopped in the shade of a fallen tree. She looked up at him, the worry in her eyes clearer than ever. "Will she even remember me?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "She will," he said softly. "And she be waiting, even if she doesn't know it yet." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Hope began to replace some of her fear, just a little, like a small candle flickering in the dark. She squeezed his hand, silently thanking him. The words felt too small to hold everything she wanted to say. And so, step by step, day by day, they moved forward together. Through fear, through exhaustion, through the unknown, they clung to the one thing that mattered most, the promise that they would be reunited with the mother she had. Been separated from Dot, the journey was far from over. But for the first time in what felt like forever, the girl believed that safety, hope, and reunion were not just dreams, they were possible. The soldier looked at her as she slept that night, thinking about the promise he had made, a promise that had become a mission, a duty, and a responsibility heavier than any he had carried before. He would see it through Dot, because in that little girl's eyes, he saw the future worth protecting, and he knew that whatever lay ahead, he would not fail her. The air was crisp that morning, carrying a strange mix of hope and tension. The soldier woke first, as always, scanning the area with the same careful eyes that had guided them through days of danger. The girl stirred beside him, rubbing her eyes and stretching, her small frame showing signs of both exhaustion and determination. Today felt different. He could sense it. For days, they had moved carefully, avoiding roads, checkpoints, and crowded areas. Each step brought them closer, he hoped, to the place where her mother might be. And today, the signs seemed promising. From a distance, he had spotted a larger settlement with a protected eyrie, possibly a shelter. His heart raced, not with fear, but with the weight of responsibility. Every step now mattered more than ever. They traveled slowly, taking breaks in hidden corners and abandoned buildings. The girl clung to his hand, her fingers tighter than usual. She had begun to trust him completely, but the thought of seeing her mother again made her nervous. What if she had forgotten her? What if it wasn't like she imagined? As they neared the shelter, the sounds of life grew louder, children laughing quietly, people talking in hushed tones, the clatter of someone cooking nearby. The girl froze, the fear of disappointment mixing with hope. The soldier knelt beside her, lowering his voice. "We're almost there. Stay close to me. Don't let go of my hand, okay?" She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. They moved through the outskirts, careful to stay out of sight until they reached the entrance. Guards were stationed outside, but the soldier, calm and confident, signaled to them and explained quickly who the girl was. The guards' expressions changed from suspicion to understanding, and they let the pair pass through. Inside, the girl's eyes widened. It was crowded but safe, a place where people could breathe after the chaos outside. Mothers sat on benches, holding children, talking quietly. A part of her wanted to run, to call out, but she hesitated, her legs stiff with anticipation. Then she saw her. Her mother was there, sitting with a group of women, talking softly to another mother. She looked up, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. Her mother's eyes met hers. Recognition flashed instantly, followed by disbelief and then overwhelming emotion. "Mom!" the girl cried, breaking into a run. She pushed past everything that had kept her scared and small, and threw herself into her mother's arms. The mother dropped everything, catching her daughter tightly, tears streaming freely. She held her so close that for a moment, nothing else existed, no chaos, no fear, no pain. Only the warmth of reunion. "Yes, yes, you're safe," the mother whispered over and over, pressing her face into her daughter's hair. "I thought I'd lost you. I thought I'd never see you again." The girl clung to her, her own tears falling freely. I'm safe. Thanks to him," she said, looking past her mother toward the soldier. The soldier stood a few steps back, quiet, letting them have their moment. His heart swelled with relief, but he stayed silent, knowing this was theirs. He had done what he had promised, and now it was time for them to be together. The mother turned slowly, her arms still wrapped around her daughter. She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw the exhaustion, the dust, the small kindnesses that had kept her child alive. She stepped forward, placing a hand gently on his arm. "Thank you," she said softly. "You brought her back to me." He shook his head, a small, humble gesture. "She's brave. She never gave up. I just made sure she could keep going." They stayed there for a while, the three of them together, letting the reality sink in. The girl felt her heart finally relax. She could breathe again. She could cry again. She could be a child again. Later, the mother and the girl sat together, sharing stories of the days apart. The mother listened, sometimes covering her mouth to hold back sobs. As the girl described how she had been found, how the soldier had guided her, how every step had been frightening yet filled with hope. The soldier, sitting a little apart, watched silently. There was a quiet pride in his eyes, but also a humility. He had not done it for praise or recognition. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. Because a promise was a promise. In the following days, the girl and her mother began to heal together. They laughed softly, rediscovered routines, and found comfort in small things, a shared meal, a quiet moment on a bench, the gentle touch of a hand. And the soldier? He stayed long enough to make sure they were truly safe, giving advice, helping with directions, and ensuring that the shelter was secure. But he didn't linger for attention or thanks. One morning, he quietly walked away, leaving them with nothing but gratitude, relief, and memories of bravery. The girl would remember him forever, not just as a soldier, but as the person who had shown her that even in the darkest times, kindness, courage, and humanity could shine through. Her mother would remember the way he had looked after her child, with patience and selflessness, a reminder that heroes often come in quiet forms, without medals or ceremonies. And for the soldier, the memory of that little hand in his, the trust in her eyes, and the reunion he had helped create would stay with him long after the dust settled. It was a story of fear, separation, courage, and love. But most of all, it was a story that proved that even in the worst circumstances, people could rise to protect, to care, and to reunite what was lost. The girl, now safely in her mother's arms, whispered once more, "Thank you for keeping me safe." And somewhere, walking quietly through the streets beyond the shelter, the soldier smiled, knowing that sometimes saving one life could change everything. In that quiet, simple moment, the world felt a little brighter, a little safer, and a little more human.